Good evening. City of Plymouth Planning Commission meeting for Thursday, August 15th, 2024 is now called to order. Members of the public not attending in person may submit written public comment prior to the meeting by emailing your comment to the Planning Commission Secretary at dnight@cityofplymouth.org before 3:30 p.m. on the day of the meeting. Emailed public comments will be distributed to the commission and made part of the official record. This meeting will be recorded. Council chambers are wheelchair accessible. Special accommodations may be requested by contacting the commission secretary 72 hours in advance of the meeting. Please silence all cell phones or similar devices. And may we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Cozart,
Present.
Commissioner Commissioner Klaproth,
Here.
Commissioner Shaw is absent. Vice Chair Sullivan is absent. And Chair Mickelson.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
Indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen.
All right. Item 2, approval of the Planning Commission regular meeting agenda for August 15th, 2024. Do we have a motion to approval of the minutes? Excuse me, of the agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda for the regular planning commission meeting agenda for August 15th.
And a second?
What was that?
Some motion to approve the agenda for today.
Agenda approved.
And do you want to second the motion?
I'll second the motion. to-
Perfect. Thank you. And a roll call, please.
Commissioner Cozart,
Present.
You want to approve the yes or no?
I approve.
all right.
Here.
Commissioner Klaproth,
Yes.
and Chair Mickelson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, item 3, public comment. Under the provisions of the California Code, citizens wishing to address the commission for any matter not on the agenda may do so at this time by completing and submitting a speaker submittal form to the Planning Commission Secretary or following the instructions noted on the agenda. Speakers will be called by the chair at the point in the agenda when the item will be heard. Speakers should keep comments to 3 minutes or less and state their name and community of residence. Under provisions of the California Government Code, the commission is prohibited from materially discussing or taking action on any item not on the agenda unless it can be demonstrated to be of an emergency nature or an urgent need to take immediate action arose after the posting of the agenda. And any public comment? Not seeing any. We will close public comment and move on to item 4, presentations, appointments. We have none. Item 5, consent calendars. And we have one item on the consent calendar, which is 5.1, which is the approval of the Planning Commission regular meeting minutes of June 20th, 2024. And any public comments? No public comments. And then I will open it for a motion.
I make a motion to approve the planning commission regular meeting minutes as of June 20th, 2024.
And I'll second that. Roll call,
I
please.
keep pushing the button and I'm leaving it open. I'm sorry. I have second that. I'll wake up in a little bit.
Commissioner Cozart,
Yeah, so she's yes or no on the minutes.
Yes.
No, just let her know.
Yes, please.
Commissioner Klaproth,
Yes.
Chair Mickelson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
All right, item 6, public hearings. We don't have any scheduled for item 6. Item 7 is unfinished business. 7.1 is an educational animal husbandry follow-up, which is informational only. And I will turn that over to Erica.
At our last meeting, the subject of, we discussed the hen ordinance, and the subject of animal husbandry came up. And we do in fact have an allowance for a temporary use permit for educational animal husbandry. So like if a student had a project for school or a project for 4-H or a project for some other organization, they can get a temporary use permit from the city to do that. Because it's not in our code and because it's a little confusing, we created a handout for the web that explains how the process works, what the requirements are, etc. And along with that, we created a new application form. So these are students that have never applied for a temporary use permit before. So it really guides them to answer the questions that we need them to answer. And then one other thing we created was a neighbor notification form because we would like them to notify their neighbors that they're going to have animals. So all three of those things have been put on the website by Dana, and they're available to anyone who wants to use them just to help them out because this one's a little confusing.
Great, thank you. And open up to public comment. And no public comment, we'll close it and come to the commission's. Bill, do you have anything to add? Questions?
No, and it looks like in the material, it limits, it shows the types of animals, which I think we were talking about.
Yeah, so they're limited, and then it's, they have to get like one permit per project. So there's an expiration date. So whatever your project is, whatever the type of animal, and then at the end of that period, you can't have the animals anymore. You can apply for the next project if you wanted to do so.
Thank you.
Mel, do you have any comments on the educational?
No comments on that.
I just want to say that I appreciate your efforts. I think it's really important. This got brought up the last time we had a meeting and it had some concerns, and I appreciate you going the extra mile addressing those concerns and making this into something that's very easy for the community. And I think it's really great, and I applaud your efforts. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
I think we all agree that we appreciate what you're going on through.
Absolutely.
So this is new, but this is like new kind of handouts and stuff.
So it's new. So it was 2022. It was adopted. I think because it was adopted by resolution, it's not in the code. It's hard for anyone to know that it's there, right? It's not
Absolutely.
easy to look up. So it's best to have things like that in the code. It's not in the code. It's not a big deal. But, when you have anything where the applicants are not your everyday, they're not a developer, right? They're not an architect. It's best for us to assist them as best we can so they have success, right? So that's where handouts and focused application forms come in handy because it takes most of the guesswork out of it for them as well.
I think it's a great experience if it's kids too, to go through the process. That's
Yeah.
another
Yeah,
learning
absolutely.
experience.
I was thinking the same thing when I was
Yeah,
writing it. I was
think
like,
that's great.
oh, what a good thing to do.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you again. Okay, we're gonna move on to item 8, which is new business, and 8.1, which is the Housing Accountability Act and recent housing laws. And once again, turn it over to Erica.
So this is one of our big topics of discussion that I promised I would bring to you as a study session. The Housing Accountability Act has been around since 1982, and in 1982, the state passed it to really address opposition to growth. But it didn't go far enough, and it didn't really achieve what the state wanted. And obviously, as things change, things get more difficult. So starting in 2017, the state began amending it to strengthen its goals. And they have pretty much amended it every year since then. The purpose of the Housing Accountability Act is to increase the availability of housing within the state by establishing a policy that local governments cannot deny, reduce the density of a project, or make a project infeasible if the project is consistent with local standards. So really the goal of the the Housing Accountability Act is to ensure that housing can be built in the state. So there's many components to the Housing Accountability Act. And each component really seeks to ensure the city is processing, approving, handling, reviewing all residential projects to achieve their goal and to prohibit us from limiting the possibility of housing. So they don't want us to make it harder, and they don't want us to limit it where feasible. So the Housing Accountability Act applies to all residential housing, including mixed-use development projects and historic properties. The Housing Accountability Act is slightly different from the Permit Streamlining Act, but both do apply. But what's different in the Housing Accountability Act is based on the number of units within that project, I have so many days to determine if it's complete and to determine if it's consistent with the requirements of the city. So Permit Streamlining Act gives you a little bit more time, but this reduces that window. If I fail to follow those requirements, it's automatically deemed complete, but it's automatically deemed consistent with our requirements, even if it isn't so. So it's important that that any planner follows those timelines strictly, because you don't want to have a project that is inconsistent automatically deemed consistent. One thing within the Housing Accountability Act that I want to mention now, because I'm going to bring it up later, and then there are further laws that have further strengthened this, is if the general plan and the zoning ordinance do not match, the zoning ordinance overrules. So whatever that zoning ordinance says, if I have a project that comes in and the zoning is not consistent, I either have to amend the zoning to comply with that general plan land use, or I have to just review it against the general plan, and then I can't review it really. I can pick a very similar zoning in the zoning ordinance, but it's basically evaluated against the general plan. Review under CEQA is still required, even within the parameters of the Housing Accountability Act, so they do not get there's no pass on that one. We still have to review in accordance with CEQA. One of the big things within the Housing Accountability Act is that cities can no longer use subjective design standards. And what we mean by that is a project used to come in and we used to be able to say, it doesn't look very good. What if you made it look a little bit better? What if you did this, that, or the other thing? We had more negotiating. You can't do that anymore. So now we have to have strict objective design standards, and that is ones in which there are no personal judgment. So if I have something of a standard that says, the massing of all walls should be broken up, that makes no sense. I don't know what that means. But if I say if the elevation is 100 feet or longer, every 20 feet, I need a plane break of 5 feet, there's no personal judgment there. So it is quite different from the way cities have operated for many, many, many years, but the objective design standards have been in play now for several years. Staff is working on objective design standards right now. We have some money from our PLHA grant to do that, so we are working on that, and that they should be before you soon. It gives us another tool in our box for reviewing housing, because we don't have any now, and without them, there is nothing I can say about design, even if it's really ugly, and there's nothing you can say either. So if a project comes before you, what we used to see back in the day is when there was a residential housing project, the way that they would get denied was on design a lot. And that's all personal opinion, right? Because it's very subjective, but it was one way in which a lot of housing projects got denied. So the state took away our ability to kind of use that as a tool or as a method for denial. So that's why we're at objective design standards right now. When denying a housing project, you're also a residential housing project, you're also limited. So you can deny it if it doesn't meet our zoning ordinance or our general plan. For example, if I get a housing project on land designated for commercial, I can say the two do not compute. We cannot approve you. You can deny if we have a requirement in our code such as parking. If for a project was required to have 150 parking spaces and they have 20, you can deny for that, right? That's in our code. That's not subjective. Those are specific standards. So you can do that. Sometimes there are objective standards within the general plan. They will say specific things that projects must seek to do, such as you must have frontage landscaping. If there is no frontage landscaping, you can deny it for that. If we have got design guidelines, like the one I mentioned, at every 20 feet, got a 5-foot break in the plane. If they don't meet that, you can deny them for that too. You can also deny them if there would be a specific adverse impact on the environment. So for example, if a project comes in and they have dead end roads and those do not meet fire code, you can deny it for that, right? But you cannot deny a project because you don't like the design, because you feel the area is not a good fit, even though it's designated for that type of development in the general plan. It can't be anything like that. It has to be based in totality on fact, and your findings for denial are very stringent in what you have to do. And of course, anything is can be litigated. So you need to make sure that if we deny it, we're denying it for the right reason. The Department of Housing and Community Development does maintain a kind of ability for both the city and an applicant to request information, or I don't want to call it like intervene, but they'll ask for an opinion. And either one can ask, say, we have this question, what do you think? And they will get back to you in writing. And they're actually on HCD's web. So if you were ever bored and wanted to see what they're saying, they're on there. In most cases, they are siding with the applicant against a city on a number of issues related to the Housing Accountability Act, but they are up there. When we approve a residential project, there are timelines within the act that we have to follow. The most important is, however, we always condition projects. That's always, included within your resolution. But when it comes to residential projects, you cannot impose a project cannot impose a condition that makes the project infeasible financially or lowers the density. So you can't say, I like your project, but even though the general plan allows you 20 to 40 units, I want you down to 20. You can't do that. The general plan says 20 to 40. You can't have some sort of a condition that all of a sudden says, I want the exterior of your building to have hardy plank wood siding from here to here to up to here. And if they say that makes it financially infeasible, you can't do that. Plus, you can't do if it's not based in any sort of design standard, right? So if it's just you've come up with that as mostly it's coming up because you're trying to skirt around it to deny a project, right? And it really is, the purpose of the HAA is to make it difficult for you to deny a project that meets our standards.
And just a quick question, like on the Hardy board, I can see where you can't be denied for the look, but could you say it was a fire safety thing? That becomes
If it was
an
fire
objective
safety, yeah.
standard.
Any fire, life safety, you can deny, right? It doesn't matter what it is. I have denied residential projects and for fire code, and they've always been upheld. So if it's fire, life safety, what if there's a mine on there and we have some stuff that they can't clean up and they're like, we'd like to build some residential dwellings, you can deny. So it's not an absolute no matter what. If residential comes in, we have to approve. It just has to be rooted in fact. And this is in reaction, I feel like, to some cities that kind of really did not want housing. And so there was a number, they were just, it's ugly, I want to prove it. It's this, I want to prove it. I'll prove it, but only if you do this. And so the state gets wise to some of those things and imposes it on everyone else. And that's what we're kind of left with in this. But really, again, the state's priority is to build housing, all types of housing. And so the state doesn't want us for any reason to just start saying no. If we've already planned for it, if we're required to build it, if someone comes in with an application and it meets our standards.
What if, so like, say it's a housing development
Mhm.
and they say, we want to build, I'm trying to think, like a very contemporary looking house
Mm-hmm.
subdivision.
Mhm.
Like you couldn't say no because it looks contemporary versus old or a certain design. Like you couldn't say, I don't like glass front doors and glass garage doors or something like that.
Yeah, so the architectural style in a city like this becomes a difficult one because architectural styles can even be subjective, not objective. It has to be very clear and concise on like what those components are, and it's very difficult to write. But right now you have nothing, so someone literally can come in for that like property across the street and housing, if housing was allowed, and they can build a box, like a literal box, and you cannot say anything because I don't have anything. I can tell them we would prefer it if you would change the design, but I can't hold them to it, and neither can you. So that's why design guidelines are important, because something's going to come in that nobody likes, and if I don't have anything, there's nothing we can say, because the state says if they're not there, you can't impose any design guidelines.
And that would be consistent. Like we've had the discussion about ADUs in the past. So as long as it's an ADU that fits the, say, setbacks and the other things, like it could look however the applicant wanted it to look.
ADUs are a little different. There is some things we can do. So for an ADU, I can say it has to match the materials of the house, has to match the color of the house, that kind of stuff. But I can't start. And then if it's on the, like, because you can have some that are on the house, I can, impose some requirements, objective, but I can't. It's hard because for many, many years, if I got a big white box across the street that was literally just a cube, I would say, oh, no. We need to break up the massing. We need to have some details. We need to have this. And the state says you cannot do that anymore. It like removed our negotiating ability as planners. Now there's no negotiation because we want everything to be upfront and clear. And it can only be upfront and clear if I have something.
And then a body like the planning commission or council couldn't really say no.
You're not supposed to. I mean, you could say no, but it most likely will get litigated, and then
Right.
we would
Then,
most likely lose. Yeah.
okay, thank you.
So I would recommend against it. So one of the other important things is while the Housing Accountability Act is important, there have been many, many, many bills that have been passed that sort of affect the way we can look at housing. So one of them is Senate Bill 9, and we discussed that a little while back. And that allows the construction of 2 primary dwelling units on a property. There's many rules within it. You can also split a lot. So then you can have 2 on the split lot and 2 on the other lot, so up to 4, plus ADUs. There's also density bonus. Density bonus is an exchange between the developer and the city. The developer offers to give us affordable housing. In exchange for that, they get other things. So they get an increase in density, which you cannot say no to, as long as it falls within the parameters. They can ask for incentives such as the waiver of setbacks or waiver of landscape requirements. And those are to offset the construction of those are used to offset the construction of affordable dwellings. Many years ago, cities used to ask for like a literal pro forma, like how exactly does it offset? You can't ask anymore. It's just they say it offsets. And so we go, okay. The only one where we can ask for more information is if they're asking for a direct financial contribution. With both Senate Bill 9 and the density bonus, we have talked about them before. Density bonus, I will create an ordinance, but as you recall, it's way low on our priority list. Senate Bill 9, I'm just going to add a little line to the zoning ordinance that says they need a minor design review so we can check them. Senate Bill 10 was passed, and it's aimed at smaller housing developments. So CEQA applies whenever there's a rezone. And really what this bill is aimed at doing is saying that if a city has to rezone a property, and within that rezone, there's no more than 10 residential dwelling units, CEQA no longer applies. So it kind of removes that sort of requirement. And it's honestly, it's mostly for things that are further out, because if you're under 5 acres and you're surrounded by development, you are considered infill and you are exempt from CEQA anyways. So it's kind of, these are very random parcels where a development could occur. Senate Bill 35 is a big one. Senate Bill 35 has very specific requirements for affordability in it. The project has to be at least 50% affordable. If they are and meet the other requirements of that code, they only are they're considered a project that only requires ministerial review. And so that means you would never see it. It goes through planning. Planning approves it at staff level. It's nice for developers because they get a very truncated review. They do have to give us detail in which they meet all of the requirements of the general plan and all of our general plan policies. They have to spell it out themselves. There's a lot of information they have to give us, but they don't have to go through any review. Now, they do have to be consistent with the general plan and the zoning ordinance to apply for that, to qualify for that. So I couldn't come in and I want to do an SB 35 on a commercial property for my residential development. That wouldn't qualify. They have to qualify within that density range for the property as it's established by the general plan. Senate Bill 330, that's another one for developers. Senate Bill 330, what it does is it essentially locks in place the rules and regulations that are in effect at the time that an application is filed under SB 330. So some cities have, when they get wind of certain projects, change their rules or fees really quickly to prevent them. What this does is it says you cannot do that if I file a Senate, whatever is in place at the time that I file that SB 330 application, as long as there's timelines for them. It doesn't go on for the next 20 years. There are timelines within it for becoming complete and everything else. But if I am a developer and I get wind that you are changing fees, I can come in and submit my SB 330 with minimal information. And I lock in those fees at the time that I have filed that. So some people do file it because they get scared that we're going to change regulations. Maybe we're working on a zoning ordinance and they're afraid that that might alter their project. They'd file the SB 330, but then they must follow through and be complete and go to hearing within a certain time frame. So there's timelines for them as well. It doesn't go on forever, but it does lock it in place. So if someone filed an SB 330 tomorrow and I have design guidelines that take effect a week later, those design guidelines no longer apply. And then Assembly Bill 821, this is, I kind of mentioned this before, and we keep reaffirming it in the state, and they keep making it more, I think it's just to say we need to start taking this seriously. If the general plan and the zoning ordinance don't match, and I'm a developer and I come in, you have a limited number of days to fix it. The city does. So it's mostly on the city to fix it, and it gives us a short time frame for fixing it. Those are the most important ones that we've had recently. I don't know that many would ever affect us, but SB 330 could, in theory, especially if we're about to increase fees or something. But, you know, we have projects that have been in for a while, so I don't see it happening in the near future. Do you have any questions on Housing Accountability Act or any of the bills?
I just had, I'm kind of probably answering my own question, but on the objective standards, I know you're in the process of writing staff and you're writing this. I'm assuming it's going to be a fluid document that's going to come back and forth. I just can't imagine us being able to, or you being able to identify all the issues in this objective standard document.
Mhm.
And it's just, I feel like if it's not there, then you can't hold someone to it.
I don't like to look, I'm in the minority. I don't like to look at everything that we write as I have written it, it is now set in stone and we can never, ever, 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 ever change it. Because there are things that 2 years down the road, 1 year down the road, 10 years down the road might not work for us. Something that works in the zoning ordinance now, maybe the hen thing, you know, in 2 years we realize, oh my gosh, we have such a problem. So I don't look at it as you can never change it again. I think what the design guidelines is, this is something that's difficult for everyone. And I think that as long as we have something, what we will have will definitely help us. My fear is always that the big box comes in, because I've seen it come in, right? And it doesn't look good. And if you build a building, it is there for a really long time, right? They will be there forever. So as long as you have something, it will work. The breaking of a massing, every 20 feet, every 10 feet, whatever the case may be, and you got a 5-foot setback from that will severely break up the massing of a building, and does what we used to say when we used to say, you need to break up the massing of a building. So we take our old kind of loosey-goosey ones and make them more definable so that it is very specific. It doesn't lead to as much collaboration as we used to have, where I used to get some cool, funky designs after working with people, but it does get the job done. And if a year down the road we're like, oh my goodness, this one isn't working, we'll just change. We can always work on it together and change it. So I don't want everyone to be scared that once we have design guidelines, that's it. And if they don't work, we're in trouble. I think they will work. I think it's one of those things where it's the tool the planner has to communicate it with the developer, and then go from there. And in most cases, you'll get something pretty good out of it.
Great. Okay, we'll open to public comment, and seeing none, I will close public comment. And then anything else, any other questions or comments, Bill?
No, thank you for the overview, because you can tell how they built upon each one to make it easier and easier for development.
Mm-hmm.
I guess good in some ways, maybe difficult in others, but thanks for the overview. It's good to know.
Mel, any comments or questions?
No, I think you covered it well. Thank you.
And I just want to thank you as well. It's a very complicated situation, and things are always changing. So it's important for us to kind of understand the latest rules and regulations. So I appreciate you staying on top of this. Okay, we're going to move on to 8.2, which is a proposed zoning ordinance amendment to add a new multifamily zoning designation and related amendments. And Erica, you're up.
So this one is really in response to some things we have going on in the city right now. The city is currently in the process of completing the sixth cycle housing element. As part of the housing element, we had to designate 2 opportunity sites for future residential development to allow for residential uses, because we need to increase the amount of potential housing units within the city. In looking at our current regulations and what we have in the city, I don't feel that it works for us, and I don't want to get in trouble with the state. And so I'm trying to be proactive with this. So what we're doing is planning is proposing a new designation within the zoning ordinance specifically for multifamily development. Multifamily development is not our typical residential dwelling type in this city. It is mostly single family. I'll go into more detail on that. We also have a few minor changes that we're recommending, both to the zoning ordinance as well as the general plan. The general plan is just some cleanup items. And then I found some errors in the use list, some things that don't comply with state law. So we're opening it up. We might as well fix it all at one time. So the city currently has 3 standard zoning districts. Rural residential, which is our lowest density, and you can have 0.6 to 2.28 dwelling units per acre. We have our standard residential, which is 4.0 to 4.8 dwelling units per acre. And then we have our village residential, which does allow mixed use, residential and commercial, and 8.8 units to 16 units dwelling units per acre. So of the standard zoning districts, that's our highest designation. But within that, I'll explain a little bit more detail, but there's a reason why I don't want to use the village residential zoning designation. So the reason being is that I don't want you to have to read this whole definition, but it's intended to be in the area surrounding the downtown. So it's a specific area. We do have one that is zoned further down 49 for some reason, even though it doesn't comply with this or the general plan, because it falls outside of the category that we've used. So it's problematic in that I don't want to start zoning areas away from our core, let's say, with a designation that says they have to be within our core area. And this is also a mixed use zoning district. And so for the purposes of the housing element, if we don't require that residential to be built at that density, I can't count it in my housing numbers. So it becomes a weird one to use. So it's hard to use. And clearly it is hard to use because we've got the one and nobody's built on it. So it's probably not going to cut it for the state, and I don't want us to get in trouble. We do have a high density residential overlay, and that was added in 2014. And it's specifically to increase the density of the village residential zoning district. So they have to zone the village residential zoning district, and they have to put an overlay on top of it. So it's like 2 zones to get to 21 dwelling units per acre. Because in 2016, we did not have enough housing opportunity sites, and we needed more numbers. So we created this zoning district and this overlay, but within this overlay, we made it very hard to use. Is very specific on how you use it, and there is a size that you have to follow, and clearly it is hard because nobody has done an overlay. And I don't blame them, because that's there's a lot of uncertainty for a developer, right? So if I'm a housing developer and I'm like, man, I got to hit that 21 units per acre to make my money, but now I have to go rezone a property already designated for village residential, put this zoning overlay on top, it doesn't look enticing to me. It wouldn't be, especially in a city this small. It seems like a hard thing because a rezone is legislative and you can say yes or no, right? So for those reasons, I do not like that overlay. And again, it's so specific with that village residential that I would never feel comfortable in zoning something that didn't fall within those parameters. And I don't want to amend just that zoning district because then it doesn't comply with the general plan. And I think we should have a different sort of mixed use area around the core. I think that's a good thing. So the city is in need of affordable housing. The state gives us our regional housing, or we get our regional housing needs numbers to the county. The county distributes it for the 6th cycle. We need to have 27 very low income dwelling units, 19 low income dwelling units, and 5 moderate income dwelling units. So we have a significant number of housing units that are now within this cycle. We didn't hit any of our moderate or below numbers from the 5th cycle. We didn't build any. So this number will keep on growing. And that's what we don't want to have happen. So in order to the state within our housing element says you have to designate certain sites and you have to prove to us that it could ever be built. It's not that I have to go build it myself, but I have to remove all the barriers, right? So one of those is that overlay zoning district. It's a barrier. But we have a large number of units we have to build. So within this cycle housing element, to meet our numbers, we've identified 2. One is at 9621 Main and one is at 9451 Pacific. This is in addition to the other vacant sites that we have. We do have some residentially zoned vacant sites. They are low density residential, so most of them give us 1 to 4. So we have to bump up those numbers. So we have identified 2 sites. These sites were identified, I believe, 2 years ago. There was a meeting and these sites got identified. So for 9621, it's 1.45 acres. It's zoned suburban commercial and it has a general plan land use designation of suburban commercial. For 9451 Pacific Street, it's 1.34 acres and it's zoned village commercial and has a general plan land use designation of urban commercial. It's a weird one. It's one of our conflictors. So this is a map that's showing all of our sites, but two of them, one is closer to the downtown. I could technically use the village residential one, but I need to give them a higher density. And then one is further away, so I couldn't use it. They are shown on this map. We kind of have them scattered around.
A quick question, and you might come answer this later, but if these two lots were designated as multifamily, would we be able to meet our affordable housing numbers
We meet our numbers with them, yes.
with them? Okay, thank you.
Yeah. We're using these two sites to meet our numbers.
Yep.
Now, meet our numbers for now. 7th cycle, we'll get more. And I don't have a lot of surplus. We can talk about that in a minute. So I can't just say, hey, these are my sites, state, call us good, I've identified them. They say, well, what are you going to do? And so I'm going to say that I would like them to be multifamily. That will be enough-ish. But because we are so far out of compliance with our housing element, we have missed the deadline. I think our deadline was 2021. We are now or 2022, we're in 2024. So we're so far out of compliance because what happens is, as long as you get your housing element certified by the state within that deadline that they've given you, you're fine. You have a year from that date to start rezoning sites. But we are so out of it that the state now has told us they will not certify our housing element for any reason until we've rezoned those sites. So this is where I'm trying to get ahead of the game, and we're just going to get this done so that that's not what we're waiting on. Because when this goes to the state, when we finally submit to the state, they're going to have comments and we're going to have to address them. But then I don't want this to be like a holdup, right? We're going to have to do it anyways. We just have to do it. So what we're going to do, what we're recommending is the repeal of that high density overlay. It doesn't affect anyone. Nobody has it. It's just a section in the code right now. We'll replace it with multifamily. I think that removes a lot of the burden. We can say we're removing the burden and the uncertainty of allowing more higher density within the city because it's just one designation. I can apply it to these two now, so they get the up to 21. And then if anyone else wanted to do it, at least they could just do multifamily and not have a 2 rezone type deal to get to that 21. So I feel that kind of achieves what the state is asking us to do to remove some of the barriers. I do think that when we hit 7th cycle, we're going to have to include another zoning designation within the city, which I'm sure will be unpopular, but we're going to have to probably have like a mid-range, like some cities called an R3, which would allow townhouses and fourplexes because our numbers are going to go up and we're we just barely make it. We'll run into trouble again on the 7th cycle. So we'll be having this conversation in a couple of years.
A question around the lot selection. I could have sworn we talked about this subject, I don't know, a year and a half ago,
I
something
think it
like
was 2
that.
years ago, yeah.
2 years ago. And that 9621 Main Street, the lot ending in 2024, I think
Mhm.
that's on the corner right above
Yeah,
by
it's
the
like,
brewery.
yeah, uh-huh.
So I thought, and maybe this has no bearing, I thought the landowner was highly opposed to it.
So no one has a good recollection. I wasn't there, so you can't blame me, but nobody's really quite sure. We think people threw up these properties. Usually a city just does it on their own. But in this case, I don't think we did. I think it was during a hearing and people offered up their properties. I can tell you this, and I should have mentioned this before, for both those two properties, they got sent a letter early July. And in the letter I said, this is what we're thinking. We'd like, you're on our housing opportunity site. We're going to change you to multifamily, blah, blah, blah. Please call me, reach out to me. We sent it to the registered property owner. I didn't hear back. And then I sent another letter before this meeting saying, okay, no action is being taken, but we are discussing your properties and we are discussing the multifamily. If you have any questions, you want to come to the meeting, this is where you can find the staff report. I've never heard back on both of those. So I don't ever want to get to a hearing and it's a shock to someone and then we're like having an argument. But I have reached out twice. I will continue to reach out. But we are hitting a point where it's going to at some point have to be done in some sort of fashion, or I will never get that housing element approved. And then we're in for some trouble.
Yeah, and I thought we had discussed, it was a property that was like south of Shenandoah Road off of 49. Kind of more, see where that white, on this map, I'm looking at this map, there's
Mhm.
that white box. I
Yeah.
thought it was in there where we had agreed upon designating that as the, in lieu of the lots that were selected, that area. But
I don't know.
because I know we had some pretty robust
I
discussion.
believe there was some like robust discussions, and I think that's where the confusion came in. But that is what is showing in our housing element now. They have not said absolutely not. We stood at a meeting, and I never want my property to be zoned multifamily. So as of right now, I have to assume they have no objections. If they want to object, now is the time, because the housing element is almost done, and it's going to go before you guys soon. I'm just waiting on the.
I'm like you. I wouldn't want to surprise.
I don't want to surprise anyone. So they
Yeah.
have had 2 letters. I will continue to, obviously when we go to a public hearing, there's a public hearing notice. But I will follow up with both of them, depending on what we agree on tonight. I'll follow up with both of them again and send them a letter. And just say, we had the meeting. I haven't heard from you.
And for some reason,
We're
the
moving forward.
owner of that parcel had said, I got a call that this meeting was occurring. For some reason, I remember this. I got a call that this meeting was occurring, so I figured I'd better come down.
Mm-hmm. That's
And-
probably true, yeah.
And
I
so
can see that.
I just know we had, it was that lot, 9621 Main, and I thought it was something different than 9451 Pacific. I thought it was another lot. But it may have been a joint planning commission and council meeting. I'm not sure.
They both make sense in a way. The one right here, it's good to have residents towards the downtown, right? Because they're going to use the downtown, right? Especially if it's multifamily. You walk to dinner, you walk back. It's wonderful. That is actually a good site. The other one, it's in a residential area. It's a little bit bigger of a parcel. I could see it working there too. It's just both whatever happened in that meeting and then our housing element consultants, that's the 2 sites that got picked.
Interesting.
Whether or not they ever get built, I can't force people to build.
I had thought we had decided, actually made a decision on selecting an alternate property. So I just didn't want there to be a conflict with something else we had already.
I mean, I also, if anyone's listening and they want to throw their hat in the ring now, we'll add them.
Yeah.
So,
But I wasn't opposed to the original lot or
Mhm.
those lots that you were selecting. I think those would probably be good lots. Just didn't want the landowner to be surprised if he ever thought maybe it was rezoning from commercial to multifamily would hurt his prospects for a future
yeah,
development or sale.
so they still, I don't know if they're listening. They still have time to reach us because both of those properties require general plan amendment, and I have to notify the tribes, and they have 90 days to respond to me. It's a long period for general plan amendments. So I literally can't take this back to you I notified them, I think, a week ago.
Oh.
So I can't bring this back before you for 90 days. So there is time within which anyone to complain. Now, if anyone wants their site added, I got to start the 90-day clock over again because I have to notify the tribes again. But as of right now, they've had 2 letters and I've had no communication.
Yeah, and I wasn't on the commission during this discussion, but I do agree with you, Bill, that if there was some discussion and there was some apprehension on those lots being changed, I do think we'd probably be proactive like you are doing, and try to get a hold of them. It's much better to deal with it, beforehand than at a meeting when it's kind of all occurring at one time. So I do agree with you. Maybe we can just continue what you're doing and try to get a hold of, maybe just hear back from them. Then who knows? Maybe they've changed their mind and they're actually okay with it now.
Yeah.
We just don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they're like, that sounds good now.
Yeah, I
exactly.
mean, residential development is king right now. So.
Yeah.
And I think that was before the planned, gas station was going to go across, which would develop that other corner. So maybe
Things have changed. Yeah,
Mixed
environment's changed.
multifamily
Yeah.
with-
Have either of those two properties found a problem with the ordinance conflict that they have? Are they appealing or wanting to change the zoning for any of those reasons?
Well, I don't think they've responded to any letters yet, so no one really knows what their thoughts are, at least officially.
I'll send him another letter after today, just to kind of keep the communication open and say, whatever we decide, I'll give them a little summary. And then they will get notified before when public hearings started, they'll get noticed then too. So I'll probably know if I'm right before that too, so we don't have a problem, but.
Great.
They'll be notified in accordance with state law, and we'll do all that because it's a code amendment too and a rezone.
I just don't know. I don't know who it is, but if somebody knew the person, like it's a small town.
So to do this multifamily idea, we have to amend chapter 19.56, and it's really to add that multifamily category. And really it's just adding some uses. I tailored the uses to really focus on, we want multifamily, right? So I don't want anyone to do anything weird. So I really tailored the uses to ensure that could be built as multifamily. And then they get to 21 units per acre, which matches our existing overlay. And then we do actually have an existing land use designation of high density. And so it would be consistent with that. That high density land use designation was done in 2016. So it'd be consistent with that. So I've mentioned this several times before, but where there is a conflict between the general plan and the zoning ordinance, the general plan prevails. In the span of like 1 week, I found 2 properties where there's conflict. There are probably more. But we have one that is designated as high density. I can show you on the map. But it's designated high density residential in the general plan. That was done in 2016 as part of our 5th cycle. I believe it was done to hit our numbers at that point. Again, I've sent letters to both of these properties. This property owner called me and he said, I absolutely want to be high density residential. And so he wants us to rezone him because it's standard residential in the zoning ordinance. I think what happened was, because I've seen the resolutions, I think what happened was with all the work with the housing element, they're like, we need to do the general plan. We need to do the general plan. They did the general plan and didn't go like, wait a minute, we also need to do the zoning ordinance. I think it was just an omission at the time because there was a lot of meetings around this one. The second one is further away from that multifamily, but it's zone standard residential and it's designated as urban commercial in the general plan. And it's bordered by the highway. There's commercial across the street, but then it's literally right next to single family residential. It's a weird one. This one I have thrown in. We can leave it as is. And whenever that property owner wants to make a decision, I had thrown it at the time and sent them a letter thinking maybe they'd feel one way or the other and we could just clean it all up at the same time. They never got back to me. I spoke to the realtor about it though, like several months ago. And I had told them that the general plan overrules and they were upset about that. So I'm surprised they didn't contact me, but maybe they just don't know which way they want to go. I don't know. We could make a decision for them or we could leave it. I don't really I don't know what to do about them because they didn't contact me, to be honest with you. I don't know if you have a preference on that one.
I don't see a preference, but if we can clean it up, it'd be better just to
Clean
do
it, I
it.
just don't know what to clean them up too. I don't want to make them mad.
Yeah.
I can send him another letter and just say, do you want to pick one?
Where are they at?
Can you go to the next map, Dana? So see the top APN one that's pointing to that brown thing? That's what it is. It's that. So see, there's brown across the street. So it's urban commercial across the street. There's urban commercial below it. But then there's single family residential right next to it.
Yeah, that's like
It's a weird one. So I think maybe because it's at the road, they thought, hey, that's a great idea. But then somehow it got zoned. I can't figure out when this happened. Dana helped. We searched high and low. I don't know if that's been a mistake since the general plan was adopted many years ago. I don't know if somehow it got messed up somehow at some other point. We can't figure it out. So it's just a weird outlier.
If that's the one, expect, we would want to move from commercial to.
I don't care. It's whatever they want to be. I'm fine with that one. They're not on my opportunity sites. Like the high density one I'm concerned about because I don't want to lose it, right? That's a weird one, but the general plan does prevail, but I don't want anyone years down the road trying to sneak in a general plan amendment and do lower density, but the property owner is also very in favor of it. So I'd say we just clean it up when we do those other two properties for the housing element.
Where's the high density?
It's like that. See that weird U-shaped one? I put high density right next to it. It's not really a U, but it's like
it's like
a
outside
weird
the,
shape. Yeah.
Sort of closer to the, I think that mobile home park sort of outskirts of town, but it's in.
Yeah, it's in town. I'm more concerned with that one, but he also wants it high density, so I think we're good to go on that. We'll just fix it.
Yeah.
This other one I threw it in because it's come up, and I thought maybe they'd contact me, but they didn't. And so I wanted it here tonight, so it's like I could make it, a thing, but they never contacted me. We could leave it for now. I don't have it on my housing inventory. It's just kind of like sitting out there is not a big deal, so I'll contact them again. And if you're willing, if you're amenable to it, if they want to amend it, do we want to just include it with our cleanup within the parameters of what they are now? If they go to something wild, then CEQA comes into play, and we're not going to do that. But
Yeah, I would say I would definitely be in favor of the high density changing. I think that's important, and especially the owners really want something like that. I think the second one that we can't really identify which way they want to go. I personally feel like it might be best just to kind of leave it and see if you hear back from them. If they have a preference that works for everybody, then we probably should listen to them. They are the owner, so I would be okay with letting that go till you hear back.
okay, yeah, because I could see where if they wanted to go to standard residential, they're already zoned standard residential, and CEQA doesn't really apply. We're just cleaning up the general plan to match it. If they wanted to go to the urban commercial, the general plan's already urban commercial. There's no CEQA involved. We're just going to clean it up. It's if they want to do something wild that I can't even think of, but there are, people come up with wild ideas. So I can reach out if you're okay with it. I'll just reach out to them again, see if they want to be included. If I don't hear from them, we'll just consider it kind of like they don't care, or maybe they don't know. Maybe they want both, so they can decide later. But then they'll have to pay for the rezone or general plan amendment.
All right, you guys, everybody's okay with?
I think that's a good plan. Yeah. I would rather clean it all up if we can, just because otherwise we'll have to address it. Later.
There are probably more, and if anyone else is listening and they know if theirs is messed up, they can contact me, and we'll try to clean up as many as we can at one time. So when I was looking at that section, I found some other errors. So I don't know what is. Oh, can you go to the next one? I was having a hard time doing this. Okay. So while I was looking at the zoning ordinance, I found some errors, and we need to fix it because it's not consistent with state laws. Some of these I know are already on the list of things to do for the housing element, so we're just gonna do it now. So mobile homes are not permitted. They are required to be permitted by the state. You have to allow mobile and manufactured homes that is considered a single family home. You do not get to say no. We have family daycares in there. The state says that family daycares up to 14 is considered a permitted use, and you cannot say no. You have to have a license, obviously. There are, based on ages of children and number of employees, actually how many children you get to have, but that is regulated through the state. You do not get to say anything. We have it the old way in there now. The rules changed in 2008, and a lot of cities still have the old rules on the books. This is not unheard of. I did add child or adult daycare because we restrict them to 15, and it's not been a comment on our housing element. We did do a first round with the state, but I have had it in other places where they're starting to comment that they don't want this type of thing restricted because we do have the need for senior living facilities. And we have the need for other type sort of resources. So we need to allow for more of these, let's say. So I've added it as a use. They do need a permit from us if they go 15 or more. But it's just to allow that greater sort of flexibility for people, especially if you need services. We don't want to restrict those types of uses. I have to amend where churches or religious assemblies are allowed because the state is very specific on that one. And if you allow similar uses by right, you have to allow that by right as well. So that's a cleanup. Right now, outdoor gatherings in the agricultural zone are permitted by right, and that kind of freaked me out, to be honest with you, because if I have a big swath of land and I do not regulate that in any way, I can go have a concert out on my site and Yahoo it up and do whatever I want. So it really freaked me out. So I've added it as requiring a CUP. ADUs are on there now. We're just going to remove it because we're going to be regulated by separate regulations. We had solar power installation, which I think used to mean a solar panel. It's very unclear and there's no definition, but I can't require a planning permit for that. A solar farm is an entirely different use, and we're just going to leave that off, so it's never allowed. And then after we sent out the staff report, Dana reminded me that I forgot to fix one, and the regulations for cannabis plants are inconsistent with our other regulations. So I will, on the next one, that'll be cleaned up as well. So based on what we've talked about tonight, I'm going to for sure contact our two little opportunity sites again, and I will let them know what happened at this meeting. My friend that wants to definitely be high density, he asked that I follow up with him, so I will do so and let him know that you're open to including him with our sites, and we'll do them all at the same time. And then I'll send a follow-up letter to our other site just saying, I haven't heard from you. This is your last chance. I would preferably like to take both this new chapter with the multifamily plus the fixes. I do have some minor fixes. I should put that on my presentation. I have some, let me go back. I have some minor amendments to the general plan. When the high density residential land use category was created, they forgot to add it to the general. They added it as a category, but then they didn't give me a definition. So I drafted a definition. It was before you. And then it also needs to appear on some tables. And the reason I want everything to go at once is because I'll have my general plan amendments. I have 90 days in with the tribe, can't go before that. I have my general plan amendments. And then for the tables, I need to have the acreage adjusted. So it'll get adjusted with these properties. So it'll be the general plan amendment, the zoning ordinance amendment, and then these three properties all together as one package. And we're going to try to get this moving. Because of the 90 days there, I mean, there is the potential that the housing element could beat us. I kind of don't think so, but we're going to kind of try to go neck and neck here so that these things aren't holding up our certification, because I don't want it to do so. We're pretty far into it now, and I don't want us to get too far. And then, of course, all these things require both a public hearing with the Planning Commission, where you make a recommendation to the City Council, and then the City Council holds a public hearing. The general plan amendment would be done by, it's a little weird, general plan amendments are done by resolution, so they take effect immediately. But the rezoning and then the zoning ordinance amendment, it's first reading, second reading, and then 30 days. So it's a weird lag time that happens with that. But that would be the process, and you're probably looking at seeing this back in about 90 days.
Great. And then open it to public comment. And not seeing any, we'll close public comment. And then Bill, any comments, questions?
No further comments. Thank you.
Mel, any comments or questions?
I think she covered it pretty well, and looking at what she's proposing to clarify some of the unknowns or could be possible conflicts, I think she's got it covered. So I'm all for letting her go with it.
Absolutely. I think you have a good strategy, and we look forward to seeing it in 90 days or so.
And if I find anything else in the meantime that needs to be fixed in that chapter, I'll let you know with the next one, but we'll just try to get it really cleaned up. So that it's kind of a one, and I'm sure we'll have another one, but I'd like it to be more consistent with state law at this point.
Absolutely. And I can't speak for the rest of the commission, but I'm a huge fan of cleaning things up and making sure it's all done right. And one and done is actually really nice.
Yes, get it all done in one shot if we can.
I think once we have so many amendments going on right now, I think once we get all the ones we've planned done, we probably need to go back and take a look at some of the rest of the zoning ordinance to make sure that everything's consistent with each other. We haven't missed anything, and see if anything else needs to be fixed.
Great. Again, thank you so much. Okay, we'll move on to section 9, which is reports. Any reports from the commission? Bill?
No.
Mel, any reports? Any reports that you have for us?
No, I'm sorry, I turned it off. No, I have no reports to make. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't have reports either. Eric, anything else?
I don't have anything else.
Dana?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Great. All right. With that, this meeting is adjourned at 7:35.
Thank you.